Yeah, I have a question about the report after this, but first, um, I was kind of curious about, you had mentioned that some of the things could be drones or hypersonics, et cetera. Occam's razor would suggest, sometimes it could be, there is a delta between what the, DoD and others would acknowledge publicly is beyond their capabilities, but privately, no, it is perhaps in the norm or observed by other places, especially adversaries like Russia and China. So, these videos have started to come out like around 2017 or so, and we're 4 years later. Are there capabilities or moments or like further analyses that you're aware of where some of these well-known videos or others could say, well, we've looked at it further, and that could be a drone or it could be hypersonic, and here's why. Are you aware, and can you describe any of those moments where further investigation revealed perhaps something it was terrestrial and explainable?
Yeah, sure. Actually, that was our intended focus in ATIP. We were always trying to deliberately find the conventional explanation for for what we were seeing. That was our intent. That was our hope. We didn't like unanswered questions. So that was always going into any problem set. We always presumed initially that there was some sort of conventional explanation. But this is this is the birth of the five observables. This is how it all started. So I'll briefly go there just for a second for those who may not be familiar. But we have the technological capability to demonstrate one or maybe two of the observables, but not all five. And so what do I mean? So the first observable is instantaneous acceleration. The human being can withstand about 9G forces before we start having negative biological consequences, such as redouts and blackouts. To put that in contrast, our F-16, which is one of our older aircraft, but still one of the most highly maneuverable aircraft on the planet, manned aircraft, can pull about 17 Gs before you start having structural failure. You start having wings begin to snap off the aircraft. And yet what we're seeing are doing 5, 6, 700 G forces. So that's pretty incredible. The other observable is hypersonic velocity. Now, those are speeds that are by definition at Mach 5 or above. We do have vehicles that can do that. Hypersonics, by definition, can do that. The space shuttle was something that would do it routinely in order to get into escape velocity. We have the SR-71. But to put that into context, the SR-71 at 3,200 miles an hour, if you wanted to make a right-hand turn, would take you about half the state of Ohio to do it. And yet these things are doing it instantly. The third observable is a bit of an oxymoron, but it's low observability. You'll hear the pilots say, Lou, it's there. I see it. I can't explain it because it doesn't have wings. It doesn't have anything normally associated with a conventional aircraft, but it's there. And the same thing on electro-optical data. You see this fuzzy little blip, but that fuzzy little blip is doing things that fuzzy little blip shouldn't be able to do. Same thing with radar. You get these nonsensical radar returns like it looks almost like active jamming. Now, do we have low observable aircraft? Of course. The B-2 bomber is a perfect example. $2 billion and you can make an aircraft, harder to see on radar. You can still see it with the naked eye, but it's harder to see on radar. The fourth observable is one that's just now getting attention, which is transmedium travel. So let's take our plane analogy again. Here's our plane. A plane looks like a plane because it's designed to operate in our atmosphere. So you have a nose, you have a tail, you have ailerons, elevators, rudders, so you can control a jet engine to fly. A rocket, which spends its time mostly in a vacuum environment, can't use a jet engine. It has to use a chemical rocket motor and uses thrusters to maneuver. And a submarine, which spends its time underwater, doesn't look like a plane or a rocket. It uses a propeller to mechanically displace water, and it uses buoyancy to go up and down. Now, are there examples of transmedium vehicles that we make? Sure. Let's take a seaplane, for example. A seaplane is neither a good airplane nor is it a good boat, but it's a compromise in order to operate in two different environments. Yet the things that we're observing, both on radar and gun camera footage, and now it appears even sonar, don't seem to have any type of design compromise or any type of performance compromise. They seem to be able to fly in low Earth atmosphere, in some cases 50 feet above the water, in other cases 80,000 feet and even higher, and in other cases underwater. And so when you see that, you're now recognizing you're dealing with a technology that is substantially more advanced than what we have. And then the last observable is something we can call in the vernacular positive lift or anti-gravity, but in reality, there's only three fundamental ways we know how to defy the natural effects of Earth's gravity. The first is through the phenomenon of flight, where you have four forces: thrust, lift, drag, and weight. And when you understand those forces, you can create an aircraft and wings and fly. Another way to defy Earth's gravity is through sheer ballistics. I can blow something out of a tube, like a mortar, throw a baseball, or even an intercontinental ballistic missile, put enough charge, and I can use enough energy to push it up, and then it'll eventually come back down. And then the last way we know how is through lighter than air, buoyancy. Think of a hot air balloon or helium or hydrogen, in which the density inside is less than the density outside, and therefore it rises, somewhat like oil to water. And yet these things have no wings, no cockpits, no control surfaces, no rivets in the skin, no obvious signs of propulsion, and somehow they're able to defy the natural effects of Earth's gravity. How is that possible? We don't. Usually you need a propeller, or you need a jet engine, or you need something to do that. And yet these things don't seem to be abiding by that rule. And so when you have all of those observables being displayed by a single vehicle or a single thing, whatever this is, now you're forced to scratch your head and ask the hard questions. Okay, are we really dealing with some sort of adversarial technology, or are we dealing with something fundamentally different? And therein lies the question. And that's where we are today. This is why it's important that we leave all options on the table until they're no longer on the table. I caution people running down the rabbit hole prematurely. There's a lot of possibilities of what this could be. But at the same time, I think we need to keep all options on the table until they're no longer options.
Yeah, I have a two-part follow-up, and then I'll turn it over to another reporter. So I just want to go back to something you said earlier about the nuclear capability, and I was curious if there was evidence that you've seen or understood that specifically suggested or concluded that it had an effect of forcing something offline, or could it be something like it was an unknown thing or a potential hazard, and someone, a human being, made the choice to take something offline as a precautionary measure? I was curious if you.
Great question. Well, there's actually a third option too, and I'll get to that. So the first option is there direct interference? Yes, there appears to be some sort of direct interference at times. Is this next question, could this be a human doing something to disable it as a preventive measure? No, that does not seem to be the case. We have no information substantiating that. Now, the third option is it could be a result of some sort of technological interference, very much like the old car radios and an alternator. A lot of times you'd get that feedback in an old radio as the alternator spun up, because the electromagnetic, if you will, emanations coming from that radiator would interfere, from the alternator would interfere with the radio. And so you get this weird buzzing noise on the radio. It's not necessarily the intent of the alternator to interfere with the radio. It's just a byproduct of what it does. So that is also an option. It could very well be that this technology, because of its application, could be interfering with our nuclear technology. That is certainly possible as well. We don't have enough data yet to say conclusively one way or the other.
Kristen Fisher, Fox.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. This is fascinating, and I cover the White House for Fox, so I've got a White House sort of related question for you. I know you said that there's bipartisan support for this in the executive branch, but I'm curious, based on your experience and what you've noticed so far, how seriously do you think that the Biden White House is taking this threat, and what sort of outstanding questions do you have for them in the lead up to this report being released?
Sure, Kristen. Also a great question. I would never want to answer on behalf of the Biden administration, nor did I for the Trump administration or any administration before that. What I can say is that I think there is a sufficient amount of critical mass within the executive branch where the Biden administration is aware of this. I will also, in all fairness, put out there that these are tough times for any administration. You're dealing with a global pandemic. You're dealing with transnational terrorism. You're dealing with the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. You're dealing with humanitarian issues du jour and political issues here at home. So there's a lot of distraction right now and a lot of pressure on the Biden administration. And I would never want to presume to answer on their behalf. But I think if I were to have an opportunity to make a recommendation, it would be to make sure to apply the necessary amount of resources and attention to this so we can get some of the answers. Because if it turns out, because the government has already said for the record, this is real. We're beyond that. We're beyond the Rubicon at that point. It's crossed. This is real. Whatever this is real. If it turns out, let's just go down this road for a moment. It's foreign adversarial technology, and it turns out the United States has had strategic surprise, and that we have been leapfrogged technologically by decades by a foreign adversary. This would be one of the greatest intelligence failures in the history of this nation. It would be absolutely catastrophic, and I think we'd have a lot tougher questions to then ask ourselves. So I would hope that the administration takes it seriously. If there's anything I could ever do for any administration, I've always been nonpartisan. My job in the government has always been to serve the president. It didn't matter if they were liberal, conservative, or somewhere in the middle. It didn't matter to me. My job was just to execute the will of the president, because that's the will of the people. And so if this administration should take this topic seriously, which I think they will, and I think they do, that's great. I think they've got a lot on their plate right now, and I wouldn't even remotely presume to know what that's like. I think they've got a lot to deal with, and this is just one of them. So by no means am I saying this is the most important thing they need to deal with, but it is certainly something they should deal with at some point.